I'm going to work today from this lovely photo of the Medway. It's the Medway Estuary down in Kent. Really nice, soft, subdued light, really diffuse, should really lend itself to watercolour. The only major change I'm going to make really is to bring the horizon right down and get quite a big sky in there. Now this kind of scene I always think lends itself to what's great about watercolour. So very soft, transparent washes, the real immediacy of the medium lends itself to this perfectly. So, and it's kind of nice, you look at a photograph like that and I can instantly see where I want to go with it. And so to start off with, wet the paper all over, just using the greys in the palette to start off with, added some alizarin in there, put a touch of raw sienna in there now. And so quite a lot of water in the paint, quite a lot of water in the brush. So very wet. Building up a soft, diffuse wash. Go a tiny little bit darker now with some ultramarine, some cobalt blue as well in there. So building up this first wash gradually, changing the colour constantly as I go. So I've got some more blue, put some burnt sienna in there now. But keeping everything quite grey. Now there's not really a huge amount going on in the sky in the reference, so I'm kind of inventing this really for a little bit more interest. I always think if you've got a lot going on in the land, then really you want quite a simple sky. If there's not a lot going on in the land, like in this scene, then you can be a little bit more inventive with a sky. You can go to town with it a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to go overboard, but gone a little bit darker now. So more blue, more burnt sienna, so darker blue-grey, and get a little bit of a cloud shape in there. And I'll just go back into that lighter grey and bring it down all the way to the horizon. A lot of water in the brush again. And continue the wash all the way down. I can bring it across the water area. So slightly darker on the side of that cloud, so maybe there's a bit of a reflection. And slightly lighter on that left hand side. Continue that colour all the way down. So that's the first wash complete. So I've got the sky and the water down all in one go. So I'll dry that off. Now that's a sky and water all completed in one wash. Very nice, glowy, transparent wash all the way down. Now I can add the industrial buildings off in the distance there. And I want that to kind of sink back off into the distance. So a very light mist with my bottle there. I can go back into that blue-grey colour that I've still got left from the sky. So I can start working on the buildings with that. Now I'm drawing with the brush because I don't want any pencil marks or anything like that to be standing out in the finished painting. So looking at the overall silhouette, the overall shape of those buildings, and very simply drawing that shape with the brush. Doesn't have to be exact. Just want to get an impression of what's going on there. But varying the mixture all the time as well. So now I've just put a little touch of alizarin in there. You've got chimneys and all kinds of things going on. There's a lot there really. The more you look, the more you see, but I just want to get a feel for it and get the overall shape there or thereabouts. It doesn't have to be perfect. And another tiny little mist as I go. Now for me, painting this kind of scene really is what watercolour is all about, really. It's the joy of watercolour is this kind of scene. It's those transparent washes and building up layers, and the fact that you can have an idea and you can put it down instantly with watercolour. Now I like working in oils, but it's far more considered, and you have to take a little bit more time. I mean, there's a lot of setting up and cleaning up after, but with watercolour you can have an idea, you can grab a piece of paper and get to work straight away. And for me, that's what it's all about. So now I'm going back in. I've introduced a little bit of cerulean into that distance there. So getting variation in this distance as much as possible, really, keeping everything blue and grey. And I can lay some darker little shadow areas in there as well. And tiny little sprays with the mist bottle. And it helps to stop any hard edges from forming. And so really, with this area being probably the most important part of the painting, I'm taking a bit of time, and every time I go back into the palette, pick up something slightly different. So touch a bit of burnt sienna in there now, a little bit of ultramarine. So variation is everything. Variation in the mixture of your colours, and it adds interest and an illusion of detail, really, without having to do much at all. But if you think you want your lightest tones the further away, and then you can get a little bit darker down towards where the land meets the water. So more burnt sienna now, more ultramarine. I mean, if you don't know, I've got my board probably about 20 or 30 degrees at an angle. I get asked occasionally, so pretty much if I don't mention it, then my board will be at an angle. I occasionally work flat, but more often than not I like to allow the paint to flow down a little bit. If you have a board flat all the time, it can puddle. So getting quite dark now where the land meets the water, and I can add a suggestion of some tiny little bits of detail, nothing more than little broken line, little dots and dashes. I can touch back in while that's still wet as well with some darker paint and allow that to run down. And it kind of helps to create an illusion that you're looking at a 3D object off in the distance without adding any detail, really. I can get some clean water as well and slightly soften that line. So a very delicate light touch with the brush pretty much all the time. Now I want to add a suggestion of the reflection coming across the water. So a little bit of that blue-grey, and then ever so slightly soften that with some clean water. I'm not going for an exact mirror image, I want the water to look wet, so reflections is the best way to do that. Even if there's not much in the way of reflection in your reference, I think it's best to just put a few in, just a little bit here and there, and it tricks your eye really and just creates that illusion. And I think that's enough. I'll start working on these little muddy grassy areas in the foreground, and I can be a little bit more bold with those, so I'll get a little bit of colour in there. Got some Viridian, I've mixed that into some Indian yellow that was sitting around on the palette from a previous painting. And now again, I'm not really copying exactly what's in the reference. I'm creating my own composition from the information that's there. I want a balanced composition. So drag some of that green around. I'll bring it all the way out to the left. And I'll mix up some burnt sienna, a little bit more Viridian, a little bit of blue. And while that area is still wet, I can drop some slightly darker greens in there and allow that to run together. Now again, very light touch all the time with the brush. I'm using sable brushes for this. And so again, very light, soft, transparent washes. Okay, I think I need to dry the painting before I can go any further. Just a few finishing touches now. So I think there's a few little dark areas in front of the land, and I think there's probably more chimneys and lots of industrial things going on over there. And there's a few boats and little things like that, but I don't need to paint those as individual objects. It's a few marks really, a few dark marks. And so some little horizontal marks and little vertical marks. And that's enough to suggest that there's some things going on over there without painting anything really. And it's not really important what any of it is as such. It's, I think, the star of the show really, the main focal point I suppose would be the cloud and the chimney and the reflection. Everything else is there to frame it, so the little bit of land in the foreground really is there to push the distance back. And these little marks now are for some separation, a few little hard edges, and to tie everything together essentially. So you don't want to detract from the main focal point by painting boats and having these marks too strong. So tiny little flicks with the brush is more than enough. And so lots of lost and found, little broken edges. And I'll add a suggestion of some reflections off of these as well. There's not really anything in the reference, but again, I like to add a couple of little marks. Nothing more than a tiniest little drag with the brush really. But it all helps to make the water look more wet, if that makes sense. So that'll do for that. Just a few tiny little marks to suggest a reflection. And now grab some more blue, more burnt sienna. little bit of that green colour that's left behind there. And I'll darken this foreground as well. And now again, bring a very light dark wash, but it's still transparent. And now getting this little bit dark down in the foreground should really help to push that distance back a little bit further. And with it being the foreground, I don't want it to compete with the focal point, so keep this very simple. Don't want any sort of real detail in this foreground that's going to detract from that distance. That's the painting finished. I hope that outlined really the benefits of working in watercolour. The fact that you can lay down really wet washes and charge paint back into that, allowing it to move around, really is what makes watercolour unique. And the way that you can have an idea, grab a piece of paper and have a painting done in a matter of minutes is what's really fantastic about watercolour. I think it's the pure joy of watercolour, is that immediacy. Let me know if you've got any suggestions, or if you've got any comments or questions, then do let me know. You can follow me on Patreon as well if you don't already, where I have a new video over there every week as well, so do check that out. Lots of great content and got a really good community. I take requests for paintings and subjects and everything over there, so if you've got any suggestions or if you've got any subjects you'd like me to paint, then follow me over on Patreon and you can drop me a line over there, and if I can, I'll make it happen. But anyway, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll be back again next week, so I'll see you in the next video. Cheers then.